this is your first time meeting me or seeing me or finding this channel, whatever, then my name is Cha Jones and I am an expat living in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I am also a single mom and an expat coach. So I work with people who are trying to live abroad. And so today I decided to go live because it's dinner time. Um, so yeah, what am I going to talk about today? And let's talk about those who are interested in living abroad and some of the things that you may be thinking about if you're trying to live abroad. Give me 1 second. Turn this down. It's too loud.
It's not loud.
Here.
I can't do it that loud.
I'll give you your tablet. All right, I'm back. So, yeah. So I often get these questions that I don't necessarily stop and I answer them independently, but don't ever do a video on. So I thought I would take time while I'm cooking and talk to the good people. So I often get like, what made you move abroad? Well, I had lived abroad prior to having a child in South Korea. And I lived in Korea for 3.5 years. I was a teacher teaching English at a university in Korea. And then abruptly, I was in a head-on collision the day before I was supposed to move back for my third contract. And as life would have it, I ended up back in the United States for a couple years. And then I met my child's father. I got pregnant, had a child. COVID happened. And in the midst of COVID, I decided outside of San Diego in Tijuana, but I never really considered it. So when I went on vacation to Mexico in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, matter of fact, there were like not that many people at the resort because it was really COVID. And so, yeah, I decided then once I went to visit that I was like, I think I could live here and not necessarily Cancun. So I was kind of like, okay, how do I do this? Again, it's different when you're a self-initiated expat. And I talk about this often is that there's the traditional expat, meaning you have a company that's footing the bill, paying for everything. And then there is the non-traditional or the what I consider self-initiated expat, meaning you're footing the bill, you're paying for everything. And basically, you have to do all your research, you have to do all these things. However, I went to school to be an intercultural communication specialist. And I worked with relocation companies. So I've been doing this for like 15 years. And at that time, I couldn't work really because all of the companies had kind of shut down and they weren't moving anybody. So in COVID, it was kind of difficult. But once I found it, I went to go see what it looked like and if I really wanted to be there. And I actually took my son with me. And we went to Merida and I did like a week there. I went to go to like all the parks. I hung out with people, asked a lot of questions, and I felt like it was a good place for me to be. And so I made the decision to move there. I went back home and packed my bags, and my lease was coming up within a few months. And so I literally made the decision and moved. And it wasn't a whole lot of, back and forth or questioning things or doing a whole lot of research. I researched the area. I researched where I wanted to live. I contacted realtors. I literally landed a day later, was meeting with my realtor who I already had established a relationship with prior to coming back or going to Merida. And that made it a lot easier because I knew what area I wanted to live in. And basically all I did was get on good old Google and put in a search. Now, when I contacted realtors, I just knew I wanted to be in the north. And, after getting there, I knew that was like this massive space, like the north. What are you talking about, lady? But once I got there and I saw the area that I wanted, I knew I wanted to live within a certain like corridor. So after I did that, it made it a lot easier. But anyhow, I never really second guessed or had a lot of apprehension or a lot of questions because I wasn't new to this. I had experienced living abroad and ask and how to get started. But for anyone who is like, okay, I'm researching, I'm trying to figure out what do I do? How do I do it? It could be daunting because it's a whole lot. And everybody has an opinion. And we all know what that saying is. But, people will tell you. Now, this is what I don't like. All these people who are jumping out here and they can give you all this advice and they've been to one place and they literally just, threw a rock and they went and, it's going okay. But then they throw up this sign, a shingle, saying they in business and they can tell you how to move and live abroad. They haven't experienced anything. And there are so many things that can go wrong with moving abroad. So many things. And where could you start? You could start anywhere. But there are so many things that could go wrong. And yet you don't have any experience and you out here now consulting people because you think you did a good job. And you may have, but you don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of things that could go wrong, especially with visas. There's things that could go wrong with finding a home. You could lose a lot of money. I've seen people lose lots of money. Yes, you can move abroad, don't have any credit checks and all the great things and, establish a place to live. But just doing stuff by the seat of your pants and it just so happened to work. And that's great and all, but now you about to consult people on how to actually do this and move and relocate a family or themselves or whatever. You don't know enough, in my personal opinion. But who am I? So I would say, number one, follow people who have some skin in the game, people who have actually done it and been successful and, have lived. And it's really good because this is the thing. There's a difference being a traditional expat where all the things come with your housing, your money, all the things, right? And then it's a difference when you are paying and footing the bill. And so I would, if I was going to be paying somebody or if I was going to be following somebody, I would want to know, both sides of the coin, because then you can get a little bit more of a gauge And I'm not saying that, self-initiated expats can't give you advice. I'm just not saying that. But I'm saying that when you have seen both sides, then, now you can tell me something, because you can be like, well, I've experienced it over here. I've experienced it over here. This is my personal opinion, and based off of what I've experienced and what I've gone through, this is what I can give you. But if you ain't did that, then you only going off of one side, and we all know what happens when everything's one-sided. It's not the best experience. But so I think when you're trying to figure out where to start, starting with why is important, and I say this all the time, starting with why is important, because when you have a good why, then you have a foundation. So it's like building a house. If you don't have a good foundation, everything can collapse. But if you don't know your why, and then when things start going awry, then you get scared, or you start having these fears, then you can stop and you get complacent with where you are. However, oh my God, I don't like it. Some of these have gone bad. But yeah, when you start with the why, and you know your why, when things do start to go sideways, you can shift up quickly, and you don't have to get stuck. Versus when you don't really have a good why, you don't know why you're doing this. It sounded like a good idea. You saw somebody's life, and you was following Instagram or Facebook or YouTube or whatever you were following. It looked like a great life, right? But that's not sustainable, because that's not your life. And you don't know what that person had to go through, and they're, making it look good. But at the end of the day, it might be the worst decision ever, because they're showing you all the great parts of what it could be. And not to say that their experience hasn't been great up until this point, or is great, but it's important to get all angles to be able to see, this is making me mad. I hate when food starts going bad. It bothers me. Although, because I just got these from the store. Yeah, where was I? But yeah, so you want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you want somebody to keep it real with you, because it's not all glamorous. It's not all fairy tales and magic sprinkles and all that, because it can be difficult. I mean, even living in your own country of origin, life is difficult, right? There are challenges. So you're not going to not have challenges just because you moved abroad. But if you're trying to create a better life somewhere else, it's good to know the different perspectives, and like, what were the challenges that that person experienced, versus, oh, this is what's wonderful. They're taking all these damn pictures and having all these Instagram moments, when in fact, hell just happened. Like, for instance, when I lived in Mexico, so most of the time for the most part, I have always lived in a brand new place. Even when I bought a house, I bought it brand new. I built it. When only place I think is really in DC or outside DC in Virginia, it was a fairly new place. But other than that and living in Vermont, obviously, but only a couple places. Korea, I do have a new place, but for the most part, I've always lived in a new place. And so when I got to Mexico, I found a brand new townhouse. They were actually still building it. When I pulled up, they had like a couple weeks left to, actually it wasn't, a couple days, and I could have moved in. But then that prolonged and was like a week. So with that being said, when I moved in, I moved into a brand new place. But, whoo, child, the first rain, which was like a week later, the first rain, I heard this, like, it was, I mean, when I say it was raining, it was like pouring down rain. And it was like May, it was hot that day, it started pouring down rain. And all of a sudden I heard this sound of like a waterfall, like water just and coming quickly. And I went upstairs to be met by water coming down from my rooftop. And it was coming to the second floor. Oh my God. You talking about some water? It was like just water and water, and I couldn't stop it. So I had to go get like all of my towels and place it at the door, and that kind of stopped it. But it was going to be raining for a while. So the next day or later on that evening, I think I went and got a wet vac. But I mean, it was bad. So I couldn't have anticipated that. But in Mexico, they don't have the same building standards as they do in the US. Whereas I couldn't have moved in the US under I can't even talk. Or you know what I'm trying to say. A person with good, like construction and builder standards that they have in the US. You have to have compliances that will allow you to be able to move in. Well, that wasn't the first time. Second time, there was a rain, and they pretty much fixed that. It took a couple days for them to come and reset the cement so that the water wouldn't come down the steps. But the next time it rained, and it was like during a hurricane, rain downstairs came to a certain level, and it all just came into my living room. There was rain coming out my sockets. It was bad. So just like things that you would not have anticipated happening, because you would have thought, okay, the builder made sure those things wouldn't happen. So there's things that happen that you don't really have control of. And maybe wherever you're from, that wouldn't be the case, because there would have been procedures that would have prevented that. So all I'm saying is that, there's a lot that can happen based off of things you just don't know. You could move into a place and I've seen this in Mexico, where you move into a place, they've painted, but they painted over some mold, right? That's not what you're expecting, right? And then you get in there and you start getting sick or something, and you realize, okay.
Can I use my tablet?
Yes, in a minute.
What time?
Give me 30 minutes. But and that could happen in the US. I'm not saying that it can't happen. What I'm saying is that when you have people who are out here willy-nilly, they just moved abroad and now they giving advice out of good luck. So I just say be cautious and make sure the person you're following actually knows what the hell they're talking about. And then there are so many different ways that they could be traveling. Like some people are actually establishing a place to live. Like I established a place to live wherever I'm going. So when I was in Mexico, I was there for 3.5 years. When I was in Korea, I was there for 3.5 years. I am now in Kuala Kuala Lumpur, and so the goal is to be here for a minute. And so you get to learn a lot more versus if somebody is slow traveling or they're a digital nomad, they're kind of bouncing all over the place, or what they call bopping or whatever. And so there are many different ways to travel. There are many different ways to live. Living and traveling are two very different things. Don't get it twisted because, just because you travel somewhere, you have an established roots there. So you're not living. And once you live somewhere and you start seeing a whole 360-degree versus 180, you only seeing half of the whole pie and you making all these decisions. It's just not good business. So I also get questions about people who want to live abroad who have children. Since I'm a single mom, they want to know about whether you should send their child to a local school or send their child to an international school or what have you. And I would say this: do all the research that you possibly can, and your child and your situation. International schools are expensive. That's first thing. You have some of them you have to have tests, especially when here in Malaysia, you have to have tests to actually get into the school. So it's not like you just, hey, I'm gonna enroll my child. No, not just gonna enroll your child. You have to go through some procedures. And so you need to know what those procedures are. Sometimes you have to put the application fee up and it could be a lot of money. And even if your child doesn't get accepted, you may get half that money back or a fourth of that money back, but you may not get all of that money back. So you have to consider those things as well, because you have to consider your children interrupting you, but you have to consider some of the things that you wouldn't normally have to consider if you were just sending them to a public school, or even if it was a private school. So there are several different options. And when I got here and I considered putting him in school and started thinking about those options, I actually looked into several different international schools. And the ones I was looking at were anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 a year. So you really, if you're going to invest that type of money, you want to make sure, number one, that you're going to get your bang for your buck, and that they're going to actually learn something. And there's a curriculum, and the curriculum covers the things that you deem to be important. You also want to make sure that you read the fine print when it comes to applications, and like, if your child doesn't pass the test, what does that mean? Do I get any of my money back? In some cases, in most cases, no. Or you may get a portion of it back. But you want to look at that. You want to look at the reviews. Make sure you review the schools, because, for instance, there was a school I looked at. I'm not gonna say no names, but there were racial issues at that school. I even have a friend who looked into a school, and great school, but then there were issues with molestation that hadn't been publicized, but the parents were talking about it in the reviews. So make sure you do all your due diligence when you're thinking about like actually enrolling your child into a particular school. Make sure you go do a walkthrough, that you actually see the school, and it's just like a job. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And if it's not in your best interest, then you probably don't want to participate. Hold on one second. What is the problem? What's wrong? What happened? Talk. You hit yourself with the door? Huh? It's gonna be okay. Let me see. It's gonna be all right. So as y'all can hear, you know, this is being a mom. Children have accidents. Here, come on. And you have to make provisions. Wait till it comes on and I'll give you the code. So yeah. So make sure you're doing your due diligence when you're looking at the school, because there are a lot of things that you may not even consider. And so what I would do is I would go online and do a search of like, what questions should I ask, and have those questions prompted and available so that when you go visit the school, you can ask the headmaster or whomever you're doing an interview with, like all of the key questions, whether it's the application, diversity at the school, the methodology that they're using, and so on and so forth. Because nobody is just going to be like, oh, let me disclose this information. Some of the information they're going to disclose, but some of the things you wouldn't know unless you actually did your research. And so you want to just kind of make sure you're looking online, even asking, maybe if you see a review, asking for clarification, or could you talk to the person who put the review out there? And for the most part, people are pretty honest about their experience. And then some of it's biased, but go with your gut at the end of the day. Like, what's good for your child? You know your child. You know what's going to be good for them, what's not going to be good for them. And if you are already homeschooling, you may want to consider that. If you are thinking about traveling a lot, that might be a better option. There are great homeschool programs that give you a lot of content. But yeah, so you also know, like, that's going to take a lot of time and energy when you're doing the homeschooling, because you have to, there are programs that you can put them in, they'll do it online, but then you still also have to be present and do a lot of the work behind the scenes as well. So keep that in mind. What else would I say? I would say I get other questions on, community. And so I'm very honest. When I first moved to Malaysia, there wasn't really a Black community, especially from where I came from in Mexico. There was a large Black community. There were, things to do. There were get-togethers, gatherings, celebrations, all types of things that I did, and I had community that was already built in. When I say that to say moving to Kuala Lumpur, that was not established. So I established it for myself. I'm not that type of person who's going to sit back and wait for somebody to give me something. I'm going to go build it if necessary. And so I established. And if you are an African American or a person of color who is moving to Kuala Lumpur and you want to be connected to other people who look like you, then we do have a group, and it's called Brothers and Sisters of Kuala Lumpur. So we try to do events. I try to, curate events for people. Like, we went skating the other day. We went skating the other day, roller skating. We're going to do a comedy show. We have had Friendsgiving. Some other things that we've done. We've done game nights and things like that. So that's important. And so I often get a question of, you're living in Malaysia, where's the community? Or what are the things that you don't like, or challenges? Hey, turn that down, please. So that would be one of the things that I would say was my challenge, was that I was accustomed to having a community and support where I lived previously. And so although I knew I was coming here and I didn't see that presence online, I just made up in my mind that, okay, if I was going to be here and I need this, then I'll build it. And, you know, we started with 0. I think we have 70 something people. The thing that I'm honest about is a lot of those people are transit or they have not yet moved here. And so it's not the built-in community that I was accustomed to having in Mexico, where there was already it. And when I moved to Mexico, that establishment of the community was just being formed. So it wasn't like deep rooted. The people that were moving at that time during COVID, we were forming that community. So it's no different, I don't think, from being here. However, there was a plethora of people moving at one time, where there's not a plethora of people moving here at one time. A lot of people travel to Malaysia and they either like it or they don't. If they like it, then they'll figure out, you know, that's where I'm going to, you know, establish roots, or I'm going to try to move there. But maybe they're in that process, but they haven't actually done it. The other thing is that a lot of people don't actually get online and establish community. You may see them in the street, so you'll see people, but that person is not, you know, in the Facebook group or connected socially in a social network. So that is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, living here. And no matter where you're going to move, if you've decided to move, especially as a single mom, the one thing I'm going to say, and I can't say enough, is that you really want to establish community. I don't care how introverted you are. I don't care about how connected you are with your children. If you want to stay in the house, that's fine. And I do know people. I know people who have children who live here, who don't really go out and connect with other people. They may find 1 or 2 people, and that's pretty much it. But they're not seeking large community, right? And that goes with the territory of, you know, that individual, what they want. But if you are going to be successful, I think it's imperative to build community. And you don't have to do all the things, right? But I think it's important to have at least a couple people that you interact with. Like, for instance, my son has several different friends, and they all have mothers, right? And that goes from Malay moms to other African American moms to people who are from different countries, other expats. And the ability to get together and allow our children to have play dates is imperative, because sometimes I just need a downtime. I need to be able to breathe. I need to talk to another adult. And then there are things that you go through and you want to make sure, is it just me? Am I going through this? Am I the only one experiencing this? Did you experience this too? And to be able to have that kind of conversation, even though you can take those conversations as a grain of salt, because, you know, just because they handle their situation one way doesn't mean that that's how you need to handle your situation. But to even have some context around certain things, I think is extremely important. I also get questions about like racism, and I often come across people who have experienced certain situations I have not yet experienced, or I don't even think I will experience. And, you know, I'll hear people say, well, maybe it's because you're a light-skinned Black. Could be. But I know other light-skinned Blacks who have experienced what you're talking about. And so now we can kind of eliminate that. But some of the things that I'm going to talk specifically about is housing. I have had several people who have had poor experiences when trying to find housing, specifically in Kuala Lumpur. So let's just give some context around this. So when you reach out to a realtor, what they'll do is they'll send you a little questionnaire. It'll ask you like what nationality you are, what race you are. Hold on one second. Or turn one off. And it'll ask you like what you're looking for as far as like housing. There's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, blah, blah, blah. And so basically it's just trying to get the information regarding the house that you're looking for so that they can find that. But there are some questions that you couldn't even ask in the US. Like you would never ask somebody their race. That's not important. And matter of fact, it's discriminatory. But you're not in America anymore. So there are some questions that you might get that you would normally not get. I, on my application, never put Black. I never put a race. I put American, period, in the discussion. I don't know if that is why I didn't experience certain things or not. Let's just say it was. I have had people who they even asked could they see them in person before they went through the process. So I say all that to say there are some standards that are not standards that as an American it wouldn't be acceptable, and it would put you in a whole lawsuit. Okay, so remember, you're not at home, and you can feel whatever you want to feel about it, but oftentimes it's not much you can do about it. Just go with the flow per se. It does make it challenging because especially you're trying to find a place to live and you're trying to establish yourself in a culture and country as a foreigner, and off the bat you may not feel received, right? Know this. That does not, it's not to speak for everybody in the country and or culture. It's the individuals you're dealing with, the owners, and I'm not even gonna say that, but just know that there's a possibility. That's not just Malaysia, it's other countries. So don't let that be a deterrent. If this is really where you want to be, don't allow that to prevent you from moving forward and establishing a home here. But speaking in general, if you are deciding to go anywhere, I know people in Portugal who have experienced something very similar. I know people in Mexico experience something very similar. So know that even if you're trying to leave America because of the race relations that are being established at this time in America, know this. You can run into the same types of people no matter where you are in the world. And so, again, don't let that deter you. But overall, living abroad, the good to me outweigh the bad. And so I try to look at every situation as an isolated situation based off of who I'm dealing with and where I'm dealing with them at. The other thing that I get questions about is, social life. I get questions a lot about social life. Kuala Lumpur has a great social life. You just have to be connected to the right people, and whatever you're trying to do, you can find that, and that's pretty much anywhere. But they got your people, your tribe can be found anywhere. You just have to be willing to go look for them. But there are several expat organizations out here. There are expat groups on Facebook. There are all kinds of people who are connecting for whatever. So if you're into food, you can get into a foodie group. If you're into art, you can do paint sips. They have those all over the place. If you're into having conversation, you can go and meet up and have conversations. There are people who are even willing to pay for that. So just be open-minded. And the biggest thing I suggest for anybody who is getting ready to move abroad, whether you have children or no children, retiring, whatever the situation is, to have an open mind. Know that you are leaving a place for whatever, remember your why, you're leaving a place for a particular reason. And so don't take that and the stuff that you've accumulated and all the negative bags that you have and take them with you. The thing that's coming to mind is bag lady. Don't be a bag lady. Don't be carrying all this stuff. It's time to release that, let those things go, and really map out the life that you want to have. I tell people all the time, write it down, make it clear. I want to wake up to hearing the water hit the rocks. I want to hear the sounds of the jungle. I want to wake up in the mountains and have this experience. Write that down. Be very clear about the experience that you want to have and seek that. And no matter what, keep your why in front of you. Always have a vision of the life that you want to live and create that. So when other things start to come up, that's not for me, or I'm not accepting this as my experience, and I'm gonna kind of go around that and let that go, and not try to make it personal and make it about you, because oftentimes it's not about you. So that's one of the things that I would advise anybody. Let go of where you're coming from. Be present in the moment for the things that you are trying to receive now, versus being connected to, oh, this happened to me, or this was my story. You can rewrite your story. And that's the great thing about moving anywhere. Whether you move to the next town, the next city, the next state, you can create the life that you want and redesign it to be exactly what you want, no matter where you are. So that's the advice I have. I'm about done cooking, and so I don't want to ramble on, but I just wanted to kind of jump in, and I've been getting a bunch of questions. I thought I would, take a moment to try to answer any questions that people have. Yeah, so it can be challenging to move abroad, but it can also be extremely rewarding. And there's so much that you can do when you're living abroad. And your life can be so much easier, but it can also be so much difficult if you do it improperly. So if you are considering living abroad and you need help, you want to ask questions, I work with people, and I have a business that I've had for over 12 years, although I've been doing this for 15 years. And I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, or I've worked with self-initiated expats who are trying to do it on their own. And the best advice I can give you is, no matter who you work with, always do your own research. Always know what your why is. Always be willing to be flexible and move forward. So I hope that helps. I'm about to get ready to eat my food, y'all. Until next time, if you have questions, please jump in the comments. Tell me where you're at. Tell me where you're trying to go. Tell me, or ask a question about what it is that you're trying to do. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. I try to be as personable as possible. And yeah, let's do this. 2025 is where you're going to thrive and live your best life and let go of all the baggage and move into the place you really want to be. So to do that, you have to be willing to do things differently. You have to be willing to step into fear and know that's just false evidence appearing real, and just live your best life. Don't listen to the naysayers, because you can always have naysayers. They're always going to have something to say. But this is your life. It's your dream. And if you know you need help, I'm here for you. I also have some great free information in my description. If you need a checklist, you're just now getting started. There's also, if you're moving to KL, I do have a neighborhood guide. So I picked the top expat areas and I define, what you would actually get out of those areas. It's a great resource. I also have a Kuala Lumpur welcome guide that goes over schools. It goes over nightlife. It goes over hospitals. It goes over culture. It goes over it's 53 pages. Okay. And after looking at that resource and going through it, if you still have questions, I'm here for it. But if you get the guide, it should be able to kind of like steer you in the right direction and answer a lot of questions that you have. It's a great resource. So until next time, I want you to follow your dreams, never give up, and push forward. So I'm Cha Jones, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace out.